Today we're hosting a link brunch following both of our services, so you can come and grab a bite to eat with someone new or a friend. Donations are welcome, so grab the person beside you and join us for brunch after this service. See you there.
One of the ways that we at Lakeview Kids want to partner with families to build a foundation of faith with your kids is through our baby dedications and baptisms. Parents, if you want to take that step of commitment with your baby, you can connect with Nancy after the service, or you can email her at nancy@lakeviewchurch.com. There will be a potluck and information session here at the church at 6 o'clock in the evening on May 1st, and baptism and dedication Sunday is Mother's Day, May 13th.
We're excited about partnering with Big Brother, Big Sister of Saskatoon again this year for their in-school mentorship program at St. John School. In-school mentorship is really important to schools like St. John.
My name is Janice Van Gool, and I'm the principal at St. John Community School. The mentorship program at St. John has huge impact on our students. So many of our kids come from families that lack the resources to allow them to network in the community at all. So having that extra person in our school to connect with our kids, to build them up, to make them feel special, just makes them come to be more engaged in school, inspired, and strive to be better.
In-school mentorship takes 1 hour of your time, once a week during school hours. If this is something you want to hear more about joining into, come and see me, Tara, at the newsstand.
Hey Lakeview, guess who's going to Africa? Surprise, it's this guy.
But hey, you're going too, Breda.
Oh yeah, you're right, we're going together. But seriously, we're excited to be a part of a team of 5 that Hands at Work is sending to South Africa and Swaziland in May. The team includes us, Sarah Willick, Jill Peacock, and Lynn Kudowitz. We are all part of the work that's being done locally through Sons and Daughters and the foster system. We're going on a learning/training trip with Hands at Work to 2 villages where we will be walking with the care workers who do this work every day.
Our goal is to learn how the church in Africa is caring for the vulnerable and take that and bring it back here to Saskatoon. We'd love to get your support and prayer for the team, the care workers and children in Africa, and bringing that work back home. If you have any questions, come find one of us or go to our Facebook page at Hands at Work Saskatoon. I'm pretty glad you're coming with me.
I'm glad you're coming with me.
Well, I'm really glad you're coming with me.
Just a quick disclaimer as we hop into this morning's message. I don't know what it's like at your job, but at my job, there is a degree of planning that takes place, especially when it comes to what we teach and what we talk through on Sunday mornings. So my planning for Sunday mornings gets solidified in the May before the September. So I knew what we were going to be talking about today, in the sense I knew we'd be in Hebrews chapter 9 way back last May. Does that mean I knew exactly what we'd be talking about? No, not that. But as some of you have mentioned back to me, you say it seems like that those chapters fall on just the right day for me to hear what I need to hear from God. And again, that's not me, that's God quarterbacking that play, putting all those pieces into place. So planning is one of the parts of my job. Another part of my job is just to be sensitive, to be nimble, to be quick, to respond to what's going on in our world, to the things that we might be thinking about or worried about. So this morning I'm going to fuse those two things, the planning and that pastoral piece of being responsive. So as we hop into the second half of Hebrews chapter 9, I've read it and I put this message together through the lens of the tragedy that happened with the Humboldt bus crash a week ago. And the reason is, I think that God's scriptures can come alive in the moment and say what exactly we need to hear even now. Now, if I preached from this same chapter 2 years from now, would I be saying the same things? No. But for today, these two things are going to overlap. And if there was a thesis to my message this morning, if this was a university paper and I had to have one line to sum up what I'm going to say, I would sum it up like this: that not everything that happens is part of God's plan. So there's not some sort of mysterious thing where it was God's plan for people to die in a bus crash here, or for kids to die in a bus crash in India. That's not part of God's plan. Not everything that happens is part of God's plan. But God has a plan for everything that happens. And part of that plan is how you and I respond and how we process tragedies that are outside of our control. So with that, this morning we're going to talk a little bit about death, we're going to talk a bit about grace, And we're going to round things up with this: why you and I do not need to be afraid. So the back half of Hebrews 9 begins like this. Like a will that takes effect when someone dies, the new covenant was put into action at Jesus' death. His death marked the transition from the old plan to the new one, canceling out the old obligations and accompanying sins and summoning the heirs to receive the eternal inheritance that was promised them. He brought together God and his people in a new way. Now, in the first sentence, there's a little bit of a word play going on that's trying to capture our attention, trying to help us make real-life connections between the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus and what that actually means for you and me right now. I think that's really important, because sometimes when we think about Jesus, it seems big, he seems mysterious, and he seems so far away. Sometimes in our lowest moments, we wonder if he's real or if any of this is real. And then when tragedy strikes, we wonder, God, are you actually there? Are you actually paying attention to what's happening right now? Especially when evil and brokenness and suffering and tragedy seem to be running the world. Back to the wordplay here. In Greek, the word covenant and the word will, like last will in testament, are actually the exact same word. And another acceptable translation would be legacy, something of value that is left behind. So this section of Hebrews has these ideas, has these word pictures in mind. And it's saying that Jesus, his last will and testament, his legacy, is all wrapped up in the inheritance that he has left behind for anybody who wants it. And like any other inheritances are only activated or they're made accessible through death. Someone dies, a sequence begins, and their assets are divided. But sometimes it doesn't even have to do anything to do with personal possessions or physical things. Sometimes when someone dies, other things happen. Something else is activated inside of us, and we feel moved, we feel touched, we feel a part of things even if we don't know the person personally. And I think that sequence has touched very close to home for many of us when we think about the Humboldt tragedy. Maybe you've read stories, or maybe you've seen pictures online, or perhaps you've participated yourself, where across the province and then the country and actually the whole world, people have put hockey sticks out on their front porches this week to pay tribute to those who lost their lives a week ago. So the question is, what's being activated? What's the sequence of events here? What is connecting all these people across the world? Is it just hockey? Well, I think hockey's a part of it, but it can't be just that. It's got to be more than that. Is it the plain fact that news travels so quickly across the world in our day and age? Is that it? So it's raised awareness, yeah, but is that the point? I don't think so. It's got to be more than that. It feels like something has been activated in us over this last week, and it was activated because of death. The external tribute is, I'm going to put a hockey stick on my front porch. But what really started the sequence was these feelings of pain and loss and hurt. And even if you don't know someone who is directly involved, something woke up inside of you. Something was activated inside of you when you heard the news. And perhaps in that moment, you got a little taste of what everyone was tasting at that time. A little taste of sorrow, a little taste of pain, a little taste of suffering and hurt. And you probably still feel some of those things now. And probably as this incident comes to mind in the days, weeks, months, and years to come, we'll feel those feelings all over again. So it's to those feelings, to those tragedies, that is precisely the pain that we're talking about here. It's precisely that kind of tragedy and loss and hurt that Hebrews brings the comfort of Christ's last will and testament, his legacy, his inheritance, into. Now, what does that mean? What exactly is that? Well, Matthew describes it like this. Jesus says, go to the lost, confuse people right here in the neighborhood. Tell them that the kingdom is here. Bring health to the sick, raise the dead, touch the untouchables, kick out the demons. You have been treated generously, so live generously. God authorized and commanded me to commission you. Go out and train everyone you meet far and near in this way of life, marking them by the baptism in the threefold name, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Then instruct them to practice all I have commanded you, and I'll be with you as you do this day after day after day, right up to the end of the age. So the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus triggers something. And it continues to trigger something inside of us. But for the Christian, it goes far beyond just a tribute or a memorial. Matthew says when it triggers something, it moves us towards healing. Earlier we read in Hebrews where it says it summons us to something. What does it summon us to? A pardon, letting you off the hook, giving you what you need. You're relieved, the comfort that you need. And right here, this is where maybe the best part of that wordplay is between covenant and will. In the time that Hebrews was written, a will could not be enacted, a legacy and inheritance could not be issued until there was proof of death. And that was submitted as a public record. So then, what is the proof of Christ's life, death, and resurrection? What is the public record of that fact? We are. We prove it. We live in its benefits over and over and over again. Every time we heal the sick, every time we do good, every time we love one another, every time we forgive each other, every time we touch the untouchables, every time we kick out demons, every time we teach our kids and others to do the same thing. So a huge time out here for you and I. The big question that Hebrews is pushing on us is this: where does Christ's inheritance, where does his legacy of healing need to be manifested in your life right now? Think about it. Just take a second. Where does God need to move from this far away, distant, too big, too mysterious? Are you actually real? Are you actually paying attention? Where do you need him to show up? Just like right now. Right now. And as that's in your mind, ask yourself the question, have you even asked? Have you said, God, help. God, I need you. Now take it the next step and flip it. Is there somebody in your life right now that needs to feel the summons of God's pardon? To feel that healing? To feel that raising of the dead, because we know that healing and raising of the dead shows up in so many different shapes and forms. Who is that person right now that you know who needs to feel God's healing inheritance? And as that you let that sit, remember, now we know that death triggers something. It sets a sequence going. It wakes us up. Some sort of action and emotions are conjured in with that. But if you're like me, when it comes to death, that's usually a topic that I want to avoid. I don't want to talk about it. I don't like going to funerals. I'll even avoid thinking about it. But I know that when I'm in that headspace, I'm actually not looking at it from a Christian point of view. Hebrews offers some help with that by saying, even the first plan required a death to set it in motion. And after Moses had read out all the terms of the plan of the law, God's will, he took the blood of sacrificed animals and in a solemn ritual, sprinkled the document and the people who were its beneficiaries. And then he attested its validity with the words, "This is the blood of the covenant commanded by God." And he did the same thing with the place of worship and its furniture. And Moses said to the people, "This is the blood of the covenant God has established with you." So practically everything in a will hinges on death. That's why blood, the evidence of death, is used so much in our tradition, especially regarding forgiveness of sins. Now, come on. When I read it this week, I'm like, that's a little bit too gory. That's a little bit too dirty for this germ-conscious type of person. And don't give me a weird look, because when was the last time you hung an animal upside down, slit its throat, drained its blood, collected its blood, and then just sprinkled it onto people or furniture or documents? Has anyone done that this week? In the cheap seats, I see that hand. Okay, I get it sometimes, but it's weird. It's not our world, it's that world. And especially for us, we're kind of desensitized to death and to blood, aren't we? And we could hit that same hobby horse, right? Maybe movies have done it to us, video games, all sorts of media. Maybe it was Halloween, because then blood and gore and guts just become like a prop. Like it's not real. It's just part of the game. So if you're playing a first-person shooter game and blood squirts onto the screen, that's okay, man. You got 3 more lives. Just refresh it and it's gone. Or if you're watching a news story or reading it online that has some sort of bloodshed, if you don't like it, you change the channel or you just close the window. And maybe that's part of the reason that we've allowed ourselves to be desensitized. Maybe part of the reason that we don't want to give it too much attention, because we know that if we lose enough of it, blood that is, then we die. And nobody really wants to die. Or maybe worse than that, nobody wants someone they love to die. Yet Hebrews frames all that Jesus has done through these symbols of sacrifice and ritual and death and blood that's found in the Old Testament. And the Old Testament has some real winner lines about it, like this, that blood has cleansing power. What? Or then it uses a 25-cent word, atonement. Well, atonement, or making amends with God, only comes through blood. Now, the Old Testament doesn't explain how blood cleanses things. It just says that it does. So then what do we do with that? What do we do with those feelings of, I don't want to die? Or the feeling of, I don't want somebody I love to die? What do we do when death is all around us, whether it be by tragedy or even by natural causes? And as Christians, how do we process suffering, hurt, pain, and death? I think our best starting point might be this, that Jesus doesn't give an explanation for the pain and sorrow of the world. He comes where the pain is most acute and takes it upon himself. Jesus doesn't explain why there is suffering or illness and death in the world. He brings healing and hope. He doesn't allow the problem of evil to be a subject of a seminar. He allows evil to do its worst to him. He exhausts it, drains its power, and emerges with new life. So for those of us here this morning who are disciples of Jesus, our aim isn't to avoid death, but to embrace it. And what I mean by that is this, is that death is not something that you and I are afraid of. Our type of people, church people, Jesus people, we're not afraid of death because we know that Jesus conquered it. That death has really no power over us. And we see it simply as a transition into the next life. But even that is not the point. The reality of death, whether it's our own or somebody else's, actually serves as a reminder that everyone and everything is a gift. You know that feeling you get when tragedy strikes and it makes you want to hug your kids just a little bit tighter? It's that. It's that aha moment that stops you in your tracks, that snaps you out of sleepwalking through life and brings you to your senses enough that allows you to see people and feel for people like Jesus does. Whether it's a bus crash here, or a bus crash in India, or missiles being launched towards Syria, all those things trigger something. All those things pain us. All those things are not good. They are not right because they do not value what God thinks is the most important thing in creation, which is us. So try something with me really quick. Ready? Little exercise here. Everyone breathe in on 3. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in and let it out. That breath was a gift. You did nothing to make sure that oxygen was in this room. You did nothing to make sure you had a nose or a mouth or an esophagus or lungs. The very fact that you have the power to control those motor functions is a gift. Now look to the person beside you. If you're on friendly terms with them, maybe just tickle your knee a little bit, just a little bit of this. And if you don't know them, it's weird, but it's okay. You can just go ahead and do that. That person right there is a gift. Is a gift to you, is a gift to us, is a gift to our world. Your next 24 hours and everybody in it is a gift. Even go back to the weird sacrificial system that required a lamb to be sacrificed. Who gave the lamb? God did. Did anybody else design a lamb? Nope. Did you put its eyes in place, its ears in place? Did you make sure that it would taste good with mint sauce or on a shish kebab roll? You didn't. But God did. So God offers the gift that ends up being the gift, sort of like Jesus, the ultimate sacrificial lamb, again, a gift from God. So as Christians, when we think about death, when we sort through all of our feelings of hopelessness, grief, and loss, at the end of that process, what lies there for us is not fear. No, that's not what's at the end of the food chain. Not fear at all. Why? Because Jesus has wiped fear away. He has exhausted, He has drained death and evil of all its power. Instead, when we face into tragedy, when we sort through all our feelings, what we get at the end of that line of thinking is the realization that everything and everyone is a gift. Every moment you have is a gift. There is not one experience you have, not one relationship you have, not one thing that you own that is not a gift to you. And some people might say, disagree. I worked hard for all my stuff. And I say, okay, fine, good for you. But I think the Christian response to that way of thinking can be summed up in these song lyrics that I want to show you here. So listen and watch.
From its sleep. If there's one thing I know, in this life we are better.
Everything is grace. Everything is a gift. Everything. So big fat timeout right there. If that's true, then maybe the question you need to wrestle with this morning is this: do you need to rethink and reframe how you see death? Grief, sorrow, pain, hurt are normal. They're valid emotions. You're allowed to have them. You were created to have them. But that does not mean that death has any power or any sway over you, or that you need to be afraid of it. Now take it to the next step. Do you see all your moments as a gift? Even if you're experiencing tragedy and suffering right now, can you look at it from a different point of view? Are you able to reframe your experience and say, this is a gift even now in this moment? Maybe there is something tangible here. Maybe there is something here that makes that space between me and God ever so thin. Friends, this is our chance. What are we going to do with the moments and experiences that we have right before us, even if they are filled with pain? So with that, the last few lines of Hebrews, they just sort of build one on top of the other. And I think these last 3 verses pull together everything we've talked about this morning in a beautiful fashion. So one at a time, they are: everyone has to die and then face judgment. And that sounds a little bit scary right off the bat. But as we've talked about before, judgment is untangling the mess. Untangling the mess within us, untangling the messes that we have made, untangling the mess of this world. But at the same time, it strikes as a warning to the damage that we have done. And it makes a point, a reminder, saying that your words and your actions, they carry weight. They have eternal significance. Everything you have is a gift, so treat it like that. And for the things that are broken, they've got to be sorted out. They've got to be healed. They've got to be made right. So the good news is that Christ's death was also a one-time event, but it was a sacrifice that took care of sins forever. So sin and brokenness and death are no longer a force that determine the fate of their victims. And so all the messes that we have made, the death that we are due, all of that has been neutralized. So once and forever, Jesus, the ultimate and definitive sacrifice, is making everything right. And so, when he next appears, the outcome for those eager to greet him is precisely salvation. When Jesus comes back, he's not coming back to kick butt and take names. He's not coming back mad. He's not coming back to get even. He is not coming back to condemn. He is coming to deliver the full internal inheritance that he has for us, everything that is in his possession, and to remove any future possibility of pain and death. So then, my brothers and sisters, Jesus is coming to heal. Jesus is coming back to make everything new. Jesus is coming back to bring comfort for everyone forever.